You know, a couple of weeks ago, I bought this hoodie and I'm kind of in love with it, to be honest. It's so soft and smooth and, you know, I get to look like a cool tech billionaire wannabe, but I don't know if it's a good look for me. But anyway, just wanted to share that. Hello, my friends. My name is Daniel Midson-Short, and in today's video, I want to talk about loneliness in the modern world. Kind of a heavy topic, honestly, but something that I have been thinking a lot about, particularly over the last couple of years. I think a lot of us have experienced a great deal of loneliness in our lives that we don't realize has kind of crept in. For some of us, we live quite lonely lives these days because of the isolation of lockdowns and different restrictions and rules because of COVID, etc., etc. Others of us just tend to be more lonely than others, I think, in our lives. It's just how we live our life, which is kind of sad in some ways, but it's just a personality thing as well. And that's what I want to talk about today. Some ways that I have overcome loneliness in my life, some mindsets that have really helped me to change how I think about loneliness, how I've learned to accept it in some respects, but also how I've learned to overcome it and move past it. The first thing that I want to share here is that I believe that loneliness is a deficiency, meaning that it is something that we experience in our lives when something is missing. So if you think about hunger, for example, you don't really notice that you're hungry unless you haven't eaten for a long time. Well, it's the same thing with loneliness, really. You don't tend to notice you're lonely until there's a deficiency, until you realize, oh, I haven't had that connection and interaction with people or in a community for a while, and I'm tending to isolate, or I feel isolated. And in that respect, it's important to realize that you aren't lonely, you're actually experiencing loneliness. It's a deficiency that's come into your life over time. Now, as I mentioned earlier, some people have this a lot. Some people, it's just something that's come online because of what we've been experiencing this last couple of years. But it's important to recognize this deficiency and how it affects us. One of the risks, I think, of giving into loneliness or feeling like you are lonely is that you feel disempowered. You feel like there's nothing you can do about it, like it's somehow thrust upon you and you're kind of stuck as a lonely person. Well, I don't believe that that's true. I certainly do believe it's important that you accept the fact that you're feeling lonely, but you don't have to feel like you can't do anything. You can actually do certain things, you can think in certain ways that will start to change the way you feel and change the results you get, which will remove that deficiency of loneliness. So the first thing that I have learned about overcoming loneliness is that you need to acknowledge it and you need to speak it out. Because if you just hold it inside, if you're feeling lonely in your life and you just hide it to yourself, well, that only makes you feel lonelier. You need to find ways to acknowledge it, number one, and then speak it out to people who you trust and you love in your life. Now, you may not have a lot of people in your life who you know, who you can trust in that respect, but I guarantee there'll be one or two people, maybe who are in the same kind of situation as you, who you can at least acknowledge and you can share the fact that you've been feeling lonely. This kind of revealing, this openness will start to ease the sense of loneliness. If you find one or two people who you can admit the fact that you're feeling lonely too, you won't feel as lonely anymore. And I've noticed this in my own life. When I was going through a really tough time last year, I was resisting the idea that I was feeling lonely. I was saying, no, I'm fine. I'm just, haven't got a lot of time to talk to people. I'm just busy, whatever. But then eventually I started to admit to some family members that I've been feeling lonely, and that reduced the feeling of loneliness just by admitting it. Very often awareness is curative. So just being aware and being able to admit the fact that you're feeling lonely and sharing that with someone else, acknowledging it and speaking it out does start to make a difference, and it gives you the ability to start to overcome it. The next thing that I want to share is to look for your part in the loneliness. And what I mean by this is that to some degree, we are all responsible for creating our sense of loneliness, that deficiency that we experience in our lives. Now, some of us tend to be more social than others. Maybe you're watching this and you're quite an introverted person. I understand that. I'm what I call an ambivert, so I'm both introverted and extroverted, but I have friends who are extremely introverted. They tend to sort of remove themselves from the world and they tend to hide away a little bit more than I would, or other people who are extroverts. Very often we play a part in our own loneliness and we won't admit that. We feel like the world has pushed loneliness onto us or caused it to happen, and the reality is that we do play a part in it. It might be that you're not very open to opportunities. If people invite you places, you might tend to say no a lot of the time. It might be that you're not challenging yourself and getting out of your comfort zone enough. It might be that you're just doing the same things in your life all the time and not changing anything anything. And for that reason, you're not connecting with new people and you're not finding any love and connection in your current relationships. Sometimes we unknowingly push people away in our lives. Very often this can be through unconscious things that we do. Maybe we're too aggressive, or maybe we're too negative, or maybe we're argumentative, or we're cynical, or maybe we're just someone who's not exciting to be around. And what tends to happen is that we accidentally or unconsciously push people away from us. So what I would say, if you suspect that maybe you have a part in your own loneliness, take the time and have the courage to ask one or two people in your life, is there anything that I do that tends to annoy you or makes you feel like you don't want to be around me, that pushes you away from me? Have the courage to ask for some feedback from people, and you might be surprised to know that you do some things that are kind of annoying. I know that I have done that in my life. It takes a lot of guts to ask people who you love, is there anything I do that's annoying? But you'll find that it tends to open up the relationship, and then you can move past that behavior to the things that you might be causing in your life to create that loneliness. Another idea that I have, which I've talked about in other videos, is this idea of being generative. You know, as we grow into adults, and particularly as we get stuck in our comfort zone in our 30s and 40s, we tend to not be as generative, meaning we're not creating new opportunities, we're not trying new things, we're not the person who's initiating things in our lives anymore. We just work our job, we hang around the same people, we just live life in the same way. People who overcome loneliness are those who are generative. They find new opportunities, new communities, new things to try. They're the ones who create groups and they invite people out to do things. This idea of being generative is simple, but it's incredibly powerful. Just thinking of yourself as someone who actually is at cause in the world rather than just having effects happen to you makes a significant difference in the way you feel about yourself and the way the world relates back to you. So take the time to think about things that you would like to do in your life that maybe you can invite other people to, that you can get involved in. It might be something really nerdy that you think other people aren't that interested in. I promise you there are other people out there. Look at groups like Meetup, for example. There are thousands of communities with all different unique interests. You can find people, whether it is online or whether it is in person, but you will find those people just like you if you're generative and you put yourself out there a little bit. Is there a chance of rejection or ridicule or embarrassment if you put yourself out there? Yes, I'm not going to lie to you. Sometimes these situations don't work out. Sometimes people say no to you, even though you want to invite them to something. But being generative is a practice. It's a way of living your life. And you will find that the more you do it, the more you attract people into your life, the more you connect with them, and that loneliness starts to disappear. And the final idea I have for you around overcoming loneliness is this idea of going from me to we. And it's a simple concept, but it's incredibly powerful the more you think about it. As a person who has experienced a lot of loneliness in my life, particularly over the last couple of years as I've been more isolated, I've realized that I tend to get into what I call a me mindset, meaning that I think about myself and me as an individual and what I'm doing and how I'm living and what I'm feeling. And that can be a little bit addictive, but it can also be repulsive in some respects to other people. In reverse, if you think about things with a we mindset, thinking that you are part of community, you're part of a family, you're part of a social group, or part of different interests, you will find that you create more of a community-minded mentality by thinking of yourself as part of a we. Very often the isolation we feel, it begins because we see ourselves as an individual separate from everybody else. And we have to change that and see ourselves as part of groups and communities. Change yourself from thinking in me terms to thinking in we terms. You'll find that there's a lot more enjoyment and a lot more value in life when you're part of communities and you're connected with other people. If you take that we mentality, even if it's one or two people connected, that gives you so much more power and development, and it gives you much more opportunity to overcome the loneliness that you might be feeling. You know, I've tried to make this video as upbeat and as positive as I can, but loneliness is a very difficult thing. It leads to isolation, it leads to depression, it leads to a lot of awful things in our lives if we let it overcome us. But it is a decision and a choice. And as I said in this video at the beginning, I think it's something that we all experience at times in our lives. We have to acknowledge it. We have to recognize that it's there as a deficiency, and we have to look at ways that we might be causing it, but also that we can overcome it by being more generative and thinking of ourselves as being more community minded. My friend, I know you're probably going through a tough time right now. I have been through tough times myself where I felt very disconnected. What I would say to you is that this too shall pass. If you're feeling very very lonely and disconnected, share it in the comments below. Tell us what you're experiencing and what you're going through. There's a great community of people here who can you can be open with, who you can share your loneliness and your feelings with and get some encouragement. If you like this video, please do leave a like and consider subscribing and becoming part of this community of people who are developing and improving themselves. My name is Daniel Midson-Short. I promise you that loneliness is only a temporary state and there are things that you can do to get over it. So keep hanging in there and keep trying new things and keep supporting and believing in yourself, my friend, because you got this. Thanks for watching, and as always, thank you for improving yourself.